Welcome to the Obvious Leadership Podcast, where we dive into practical leadership insights that are, well, obvious. Your hosts have walked the talk, and now they're sharing their knowledge, strategies, and advice. Let's jump into today's episode and explore the world of leadership with your hosts, Joey and Omar.
Another fun-filled episode today at Obvious Leadership.
Most definitely. I came with the dad jokes today. I'm just playing, guys.
No, but today, guys, in all seriousness, we're gonna be talking about some heated stuff. I know Joey's got some fire in his belly today from the conversation we were having earlier. So be ready for that stuff. And honestly, it's going to be about mindset and mentality. For all you guys thinking that's the same thing, those are two separate and different things, but people use them interchangeably. But you'll see what we mean as we go through. So stick till the end and you'll find out. But before we get started, be sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button and keep up on these videos and let us know what your thoughts are. Because today, we're going to light some fires.
Well, hey, man, just to jump into it, man. So talking about mindset and mentality, right? I feel like a lot of people use that interchangeably, but, I think if you don't separate those things, you run the risk of identifying maybe what the wrong problem may be, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to talk about that, right? So your mindset on certain things may not be like your mentality. I feel like your mentality is kind of like what we talked about. It's a habit, right? This is something that you are just, it's kind of programmed into you, and that's what you are, right? Whereas your mindset is like how you want to think about something, right? And kind of what your bias is to something. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, in all earnest, right? Think of mentality as being like that short term, like attitude or how you see something short term, right? The mindset, that's actually going to be the long term. That's how you interact. That's how you go about business. That's your overarching concept of the way things are. Yeah. So for me, like the way I view it is it's funny because it's what 2023 now. This has been probably something that's been stuck to me for over 17 years. I had an ex once. She was big into like psychology and philosophy, and she broke it down because I used to use it a lot interchangeably, right? Your mentality, your mindset. Mindset and frame of mind are kind of very similar to each other, just FYI. But the way she described it was mentality is the way criminals think about things, right? Okay. If you have that mindset of a mentality, then it's more criminal. You're not really thinking necessarily long-term, and it's very dubious, right? Whereas your mindset is how you actually view the long-term goals of what you're doing. And you're actually thinking long-term. And before you come at me with, well, the mafia's been around for yada, 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 this and that, right? That's not the kind of criminal she was talking about.
Man, so I think, so you're saying mindset is long-term. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's your muscle. That's actually what you're going about doing on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah.
Your mentality could be like you're trying to do like, say, a short-term change in your business. You're trying to bring in this, if you guys have ever seen, what is it? The Goods, like that. Sorry, like satirical, where a car salespeople type of movie. Funny as shit, right? It makes you laugh. Will Ferrell's in it. And it's one of those like completely ad-lib type of movies. But that would be kind of the mentality. You're trying to bring in a short-term change and you're trying to see and get long-term results, but you're not thinking about the long term. You're not thinking about how that's actually going to affect your reputation, your your actual business down the road, the cost of this and that. It's just, we got to do this now or else.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I think you're hitting it right on the nail there, man. So tell me what you think about, like, how do you go about changing either a mindset or mentality? What's a different approach?
Well, the mindset is going to be your actual habits. It's what you're doing every single day from the moment you get up to the moment you end up leaving and going to bed, right? It's how you plan your day. It's how you go about your business. Now, there is no magic bullet for this. Okay. Hands down. There are ways you can tell if you're doing things wrong, because obviously your results can speak for themselves. And if you're trying to chase somebody, that's probably another story, right? But it's very hard for people to truly look in the mirror and say, I need to change from a mentality to a mindset frame of mind. Okay. That's because it's hard to tell the difference. But think of it this way. If it's something that you would do as a knee-jerk reaction, that's probably a mentality. Right? If it's something that you're like not meticulously planning, but you are actually spending time to plan out to adjust, because obviously we all know things change on the battlefield. Things are going to pop up. Things are going to happen that is going to require you to change, not necessarily the entire battle plan, but certain aspects of what you're doing, and maybe the entire battle plan, right? You may actually have to change everything based on how the outcomes are turning out. That is when you're actually know that you're falling more into a mindset. You're thinking about the overall big picture and not worried about the short-term gains. Right?
Okay.
That'd probably be like the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about laying a foundation. So a mindset, laying a foundation, waiting for the concrete to kind of set there. So basically you're saying, hey, the mindset is the base of what you do, whereas the mentality is kind of like the how you do it, maybe.
Nope, not even. The mindset is the blueprints.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It's not even the foundation. It's literally before you even pour anything down, because that's going to determine how things are. Because you could be digging and you find out, oh, this isn't going to work this way. We're going to need a different approach. Right.
Yeah.
At least you're adapting to it. The mentality is that knee-jerk reaction. Right. Somebody cuts you off and you decide to flip them off. Right.
Yeah, man.
See one of your employees that didn't greet somebody the way that you told them to greet. Right. So you reprimand them. Right. The first knee-jerk reaction is, reprimanding them instead of helping them get better.
Okay.
Right? That knee-jerk reaction, because they didn't do this, I'm going to do this. Right. That's where I say, like, the way she said it literally stuck, because it was almost, if you think of it as like, it's criminal, right? Pretty much something happened, so automatically they're going to retaliate. That's the best way that I view mentality. Now, mind you, you guys obviously can take it how you want, right? That's how it stuck for me, and that's what's helped me kind of differentiate between the two to help better plan out long-term what I'm doing, not just for myself, but also the way I train my employees, the way I do things. I don't want to do knee-jerk reactions. I hate fire drills, guys. All right. Those are the worst thing. If you're in an organization that's consistently doing fire drills, there's an issue with the leadership from the top down, hands down. Okay. And if you're one of those leaders that's watching this, it's the truth. There are ways to overcome that. But if you're consistently doing fire drills, you guys need better leaders and you need a better training material, hands down, point blank.
All right. So we talk about the waterfall effect, right? We talk about culture, right? And we talk about how that rolls down basically the waterfall, right? And so those little blocks, those little pieces of rock that are sticking out, that are basically breaking up that culture that is coming down, right, to the front lines, right? Would you say that is a mindset or a mentality breakdown?
Well, I guess the question is going to be, are you in an organization that has culture, or are you in an organization that says, we need to build better culture.
Okay.
All right. And what I mean by that is if you're an organization that says, yeah, we're building a culture, or we're always looking for, ways to incentivize our team to have a team culture, then obviously that's a bad thing, because that obviously tells you off the bat there is no culture, there is no belonging in the organization. A company that has an actual culture doesn't need to really go about tooting and touting what they got. And actually, a great example of this is Zappos. And I'll say Zappos before they got bought by Amazon, right? Because I went and did a tour with a few fraternity brothers back in the day. And their culture, amazing, right? You go in the first 90 days, okay? They got you in what's known as an incubator. Pretty much they're there to help you train, to get comfortable with the team. And the craziest thing, I don't know if they still do this, but back then they would pay you to quit within that 90-day period. Okay. Because the thing was, they didn't want somebody who didn't like the organization and wasn't meshing. So instead of making them feel bad and trying to force them out, hey, if you're not happy here, we'll pay you to leave within your incubation period. But if you like it, stick with it, and then you'll be able to prosper. Because once you got past the incubation period, that's when you actually join the organization. But at least they gave you enough time to understand what the ins and outs were of the company, whether you're going to like the position, not like it, to kind of, mingle around other people and see what they like, see paths of growth that you can see for yourself. And if you really think about it, 90 days is a very short period.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're talking about, like, for instance, right now with the waterfall, right, the rock sticking out, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Right. An organization that is running without any type of friction means that they're being surrounded by a bunch of yes people. And for a leader, that is absolutely the worst thing that you can have around you, because you will never know anything wrong that's actually happening that needs to get addressed right away, because that's a cancer to the organization.
Right.
Right. Or a cancer to your team if it's local.
Right. Well, I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, an organization can't really have a mindset per se. That mindset is basically set by the people that run that organization, right? And so that mindset being the blueprints, as you're saying, right? If something needs to be changed, it needs to change within the culture of those people that are running the organization, right?
I mean, it can. That's where you have your vision statement, right? Where do the founders or the leaders at the executive level, where do they see the organization moving, right? That's the vision for the company. And that's going to lay pretty much the direction that you're going to be going with. You are going to still have some type of blueprint at that level, because you have to have an understanding of what you want to be able to do within X amount of time, right? And you see it with publicly traded companies. It's pretty much what they tell their investors they're going to do. Now, I'm not going to say publicly traded companies have really great blueprints for business, because most of them do a lot of funky financials on the back end to make their spreadsheets and their financials look really good when it comes down to those press releases and doing the investor relations and earnings reports, right? They're doing it for Wall Street. They're not actually doing it to really bring in true value for the organization, for the people. And really that just hurts the investors, because it's all short term. That's when you're talking about mentality versus mindset. They're really looking at the short term, but really what they're doing is they're screwing themselves. They're screwing the team. They're screwing the organization as a whole, because they're not there for the long term. They got a golden parachute.
Right.
Right. They're there to make things look good. And if it doesn't, well, I'm out anyway. Somebody else is going to take over this, for junk.
Right. Man, so like we gotta talk about, how do you notice a breakdown in a mentality and a mindset, right? How do you notice where, hey, I might be going down the wrong road? And it might have to be a lot of self-internal realization, or maybe it needs to come from a coach. Maybe it needs to come from a mentor.
Well, let's look at it at a local level, right? Let's talk about we'll say a district manager. Okay. You got an area manager, district managers in charge of, several locations, and obviously several leaders, and then their teams below them. You're a DM and you have one of your guys come up to you and it's like, hey, Joey, I got an issue, right? And this is, we could say, a fairly new leader, right? They've been in sales, they've been with the organization, but they're fairly new to the leadership position. Like, my team sucks and there is no way none of them are going to get better. They just don't do what I tell them to do. And I've been telling them to do things over and over again for like the last 6 months, right? And I know I'm on a write-up because of performance, but it's not me. They just suck. I got to replace them all. Right? That's a mentality issue. That's not a mindset, because their mindset, they haven't understood that they're the leader. They're the ones responsible for the direction that their team is going and how their team is taking the information.
Yeah.
Right. They're still stuck in that, well, this is how I've done things, so this is how you're going to do it. I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to do it. Right. You've seen me do it.
Yeah. But I mean, as that person in that situation, like, are you supposed to realize that yourself, man? That's you have to look at yourself like a little bubble in a cloud, right? That you're sitting down looking at yourself, like, that's how I feel like you have to realize those things, man, because like you're just going to keep going the way you're going, right? Because like you said, it's I feel like it's part of your mindset that leads to that realization that the mentality is wrong, right? I mean, would you say that those two are connected in that way?
I mean, it depends on the individual, right? A lot of people aren't going to snap out of it. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of your, top reps that are pushed into a leadership role, it's going to be very hard for them to accept the fact that they suck at leadership. So it's going to be very hard for them to look in the mirror and be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm looking in the mirror, right? Omar, this is what's been happening. I suck, right? I suck at leadership, but I want to get better. You're going to be hard pressed to hear somebody say that, because it's not something that they're used to saying. They're used to going out there and winning and overcoming obstacles. And overcoming obstacles is typically somebody else that's causing the obstacle. And they're looking at it as, well, they're the ones causing it, and the simple solution is just to replace them. But that's not it, because you're going to replace them and you're going to lose a lot of good talent, and you're going to bring a bunch of people on board that you still need to train, but you had an issue training the previous people that were on board.
Yeah.
Like that's the breakdown. And I mean, a long time ago, so this is back when I was in college and I was doing wireless sales, right? They promoted one of the guys I was working with to take over the location. I was like, all right, you guys are making a mistake. Like, he's not good. His numbers are okay, but I mean, you guys know what he's doing for sales, so I'll just leave it at that. Okay. It was one of those situations where his numbers on the front end look good, so they were going to promote those kind of numbers, right? But you know what the craziest thing happened? It was me, another rep, and that dude. So the three of us in the store. We have had that before with a different manager, right? They're supposed to be bringing somebody else on board to fill the empty spot that just got created. Never had an issue with the till before. Been at the location for over a year. And all of a sudden, he's management. Sometimes closes on his own. And all of a sudden, we got issues with the till. And this is before they installed cameras in all the stores. So it's like, I'll reach out to the DM and be like, yo, like, this is the third night that we're short on the till. Like, I'm not saying anything. I'm just telling you we're short on the till. So I don't know what you guys want to do.
Yeah.
Because we've been here, at that time, I think I was with the company like 2-3 years. I was just wrapping up my my bachelor's. I was like, so I don't know what you guys want to do, but y'all need to figure it out, because it was one of those, like, the guy was not a leader. He didn't want to, he was there because obviously it was extra pay. But he could care less about the company. He could care less about the position. He could care less about becoming better at what he was doing. But if there was any issues, it was always everybody else's fault, right?
Yeah.
Or he wasn't responsible because of this or because of that. And it's like not just missing till, but also issues with inventory. And it was just a big thing, right? And that's where you have that mentality where it's never you as a leader. And you and I both know this. As a leader, it doesn't matter if it's you directly. If there's an issue on the team or in the team or with the team, it's on you as a leader.
Yeah. Right.
You're responsible for the issues, and your team gets the glory when things are great. And that's just the way it is and the way it should be, because you want to praise your team and you want to protect your team.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, you don't want to break them down and kind of use them as the fault, right? You kind of want to use their faults as leverage to help them get better.
Exactly. And that's where you have to make sure you understand like who your team is, right? So you have to really have a game plan going in to understand like different mindsets, different personalities, how they can best be able to play off each other so that you can get the most with what you have and be able to help them excel at what they're doing, right?
Right.
And that's like the biggest thing. It's just like in any sports, when you have, what you have on the team, you know who to play for certain plays, you know who to play when you have certain players on the field, both for yourselves on your team and also the opposing team. You want to have a good idea of what you're dealing with. It's just like having, different locations where, all right, we're going to have a bunch of these kind of customers where, X, Y, and Z tends to be like the biggest obstacles we run into. It's obviously something you're going to coach to, and you're going to look to have those players on board and to be able to get them up to speed with what you need. And then also work on the scheduling to ensure you have the right people at the right times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like one of the things you said about football, man, I'm just thinking, like, could you imagine not having a coach on a team and they're out there trying to play the game, right? If we want to call it that, they're out there on the football field and nobody's coaching, nobody's calling plays. What do you think's happening on the field? Like, could you imagine the case? Right? Everybody knows the goal. Get the ball down there, right? Or defend, right? Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. But if there's no organization of, hey guys, we need to run this right now to oppose whatever's coming right, down this lane right here. I mean, that's really how you move forward, right? That
oh yeah,
the that you get from the coach is what propels that team forward. You can have a whole bunch of all-stars. You can have all those guys on the field, but if there's nobody calling a play, nobody's gonna be doing anything, that's productive.
Yeah. I mean, you got to make sure that the team can be self-sufficient, but you still need somebody that's going to be able to assist, because it's a different perspective that they see, hands down, right? Because when you're in the rough, it's a different point of view than when you're on either the sidelines or where, you got a bird's eye view. Obviously, completely different kinds of views that you see. And that's a big thing. Before we get going any further, guys, if you haven't yet, check out the video description. There's going to be a link on there. Click on it. Subscribe to our newsletter. You guys will get bi-weekly emails from us with recaps on the videos that we have and giving you actionable items that you guys can take away from the videos that we're doing. So be sure to hit that video link. Let us know also what you guys think on the comments. Okay. Now, the other thing, right, when it comes to like that mindset mentality type of thing, is knowing who you have and how that can be overcome, right? Kind of alluding to a little bit what we talked about earlier, because it definitely can change. But the biggest thing is, does that person want to change?
Right.
Right. And for some people, the mentality, especially if they're just a seller, hey, if they're a decent seller and, they've been improving slightly, but they're going to stake in that mentality, it's going to be very hard to break them out. Your top sellers in the role that they're in as a seller have a really good mindset, right? And when I say a top seller, I'm not talking about they sell the most at the front and they also have the highest churn on the back end, right? I'm talking about the one whose numbers stick, because you all know what I mean when somebody is selling, but then the numbers on the back end are constantly getting returned, getting canceled, and you see a lot of attrition. I don't want that on my team.
Right.
Like,
Agree.
I don't want that on my team. I don't want that in my organization. But those top sellers that are constantly doing very well, they have the return business. They have customers seeking them out. They have a really good mindset about what they're doing in that role. Now, once they move into a leadership role, they'll have a mentality unless they have some kind of guidance on how to become better. Because what they're going to do, and it's not really a fault on themselves, right? What they're going to try to do is do what's made them successful as a seller in a leadership role. And oftentimes that means that they are on the field, out on the floor, selling, instead of leading, training, and developing.
Right.
Right. And that doesn't do the team any good. So what, Joey, if you're out there selling, but you're giving all the stuff to the team, they're not going to learn anything. All they know is that, well, when Joey's here, I don't have to try as hard because he's going to make up the sales for me.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
why I like having Joey around. It's like, no, I won't make you work twice as hard, but you're going to love the outcome afterwards. You might, hate me while I'm here, but when you see that check, whoo, are you going to be happy?
Like, and I think that's part of, being a good leader is getting somebody to do something, not even realizing that they're doing it, right? Not even getting the outcome that you're looking for them to do. Just because you're you're there walking them through it, and just walking them through the whole situation, not doing it for them, because then they don't learn anything, right?
Yeah. And that's like the biggest thing. But that's going to be that shift from a mentality to a mindset, right?
Yeah.
In that leadership role. And that's when you're a new leader, that's going to be pretty tough. There is nothing wrong with struggling as a leader. If you yourself say, like, I am not struggling, hey, maybe you're a natural born leader. Maybe you've had a lot of leadership experience in the past that you're using to your advantage. 90% of the time, unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be a lot of people that have tenure that get promoted into leadership roles, and they're going to struggle. They're going to hold a team down. You're going to have somebody in leadership that's going to be protecting those people because they like them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like family. They're my friend. They're this or that. But is it the best interest for the organization? Well,
Right.
They have the most tenure. That doesn't mean much. I've seen plenty of times where, district managers and regionals get demoted back into their DM or store positions. And, those people will stay or they'll leave, right? They'll stay because they're in a position where, well, they're not struggling as much and they're going back to what they knew. And guys, if you're a store manager that's looking to become like a territory, whether it's area, district, regional, it is a different type of field that you're running into. It is a different mindset that you have to get into because it's not the same to run multiple locations, a multi-unit location, than it is to run one location that you're constantly going and visiting, right? And that's where a lot of leaders end up having big issues. Because, you could have developed your team at your location to do, really well without you needing to be there, because you're going to be out, driving outside sales, whether it's, through business contacts, business networking events, things like that. And you're still getting operations taken care of. But when you become like a multi-unit leader, that's where things are a little bit different, right? And not everybody on your team is going to see things, and they are not going to see things the way you do. And they're not going to have the skills. Some of them will have better skills. Others will have underdeveloped skills, and they're doing well because the team is good as a whole, but that leader themselves is still needing a lot of work. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think the difference is probably a difference in leading like a team of salespeople versus a team of leaders, right? You can coach somebody to sell, right? You can coach them how to get better, but as we've talked about in the past, like it's not when you're coaching leaders, it's not just about how to coach your people how to sell. It's about coaching your leaders to be leaders, right? So that they can learn how to coach their people to sell, right? It's definitely a different mindset.
It is. But that's where you have to change. Because like I said, I've seen plenty of leaders get demoted from, one position down to the position below where they came from.
Yeah.
because they just weren't ready. And a lot of that is there was no development in those roles for them to step from a store to a multi-unit leadership role. There just wasn't. It was a well, you did well in here, you'll figure it out eventually type of situation, right? And it's messed up. But here's the thing, it goes back to what we talked about, where a lot of smaller organizations who do not have the appropriate resources to help you learn what you need to learn.
Right.
So it's not necessarily your fault, but it's something that you could learn before you get into that role. Just a lot of small organizations are not able to do that. And a lot of them wish that they could. Some of them have never thought about that because they're like, well, if they got it, they got it. And that's who we need. And obviously that's not the kind of role that somebody wants to step in and be successful. Don't get me wrong, I'll step into it and it looks really good on my resume.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, could you imagine that the leader that, you know, like the example you were saying earlier, the leader that comes in, steps in, and does things for employees, right? Could you imagine being that person as a district or an area manager? Every time you walk into a store, you start doing the leadership for the leader that's currently in that store. Could you imagine what happens to like I mean, to the leader themselves, but also the mentality of the people that work at that location? You know, I feel like it may just discredit everything that the leader that is supposed to be there, you know, everything that they've been trying to do, it just goes out the window.
Oh yeah, it really does. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you're going to have to step in because you have a really bad leader. I used to have a guy in one of the districts I took over, constantly called out, and he was a leader, right? And he would party with the team. So he would call out the days after they would party, and I would know this because they just told me, like, yeah, we were drinking last night. And I was like, listen, I didn't hear any of that. But if you're going to be doing stuff like that, you still got to show up. Just because you have a hangover is not an excuse to not show up.
Yeah.
Right. You got to be responsible for what you have. You're running a large ship. It's got to be successful. And inventory was always off, things like that. So in this case like that, I was stepping in because pretty much it was, the message is this: either you step it up or I'm going to find somebody to step into this role.
Yeah.
Right. But if I need to step in to make sure that this location is not hemorrhaging money, because at the end of the day, inventory issues, revenue issues, that affects my scorecard. That affects me as a leader.
All right.
So you got to step it up. But in that same respect, one of the leaders I had that stepped into that location, I would always tell her, hey, when I step in, I don't want to step on your toes. If you're having issues at the location, let me know. I will step in and I will be the bad guy. Right. If there's any like disciplinary stuff that you're uncomfortable with doing or that needs to get taken care of, but you don't want to ruffle the feathers because obviously it's a little bit smaller location, let me know. We'll handle it. I'll step in and it'll come from me. Right. As a leader, you also have to be okay with being the bad guy. And this is why I've always said, as a leader, you should not be BFFs with your team because you need to be able to also handle business. Right. It's very tough. And that's where a lot of people run into issues because a lot of people don't know how to differentiate between being friends and being at work and making sure business gets done. And then after work, cool, we're back to being friends, even though I had to chew you out today, even though I had to write you up today. Right. A lot of people don't know how to be able to differentiate between that. And that causes a lot of friction that bleeds into the workplace.
Yep.
Right. And I'm not saying don't spend time with your team. I'm not saying don't take them out, for doing a great job, stuff like that, doing, outside events with your team. By no means am I saying that.
Right.
I'm just saying you need to be able to differentiate between when it's appropriate to be, BFFs at work and when you need to actually get business done. Right.
So would you say that would be on the mindset or mentality when it comes to being BFS with the team members that are there?
So the example I gave you with the first employee, right, that first manager, that was a complete mentality, right? It was because he wasn't thinking long-term, Like, this is the mindset I need to have to ensure that this location not only runs well, but can also grow, right? Because he wasn't looking for ways to grow business year over year. It was just like, I'm here. Like, bro, that's not how things work.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and like the guy was a good buddy of mine too, right? And obviously it was one of those where I was like, I had to lay it down. Like, this is what we have to do. And like, this is your options. Like, if you continue this way, I'm not going to have another recourse. Like, this, it's not even coming from me. It's literally coming from the organization.
Yeah.
Right. But obviously it was one of those where that kind of talk wasn't something that would roll out. So what would happen? He kept calling out even more.
Oh, jeez.
It's like, and that's why I say that's a mentality, because he's not thinking long term. He's just, well, I'm here, things get done. And it's like, yeah, that's nice. But what about, the other times when you're not here because you call out 2 times at least every single week?
Right.
Like, that
Man,
becomes an issue.
yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm not saying there's a difference between going in and doing and just taking the reins, whether you, I guess whether they're given to you or just go in and take them. But definitely, if you have a sinking ship, if you're in one of those positions, you can't let that ship sink. Like, you can't, right? You have to go in, you have to take action, you have to do things to patch those holes, right? But in that time, you're also noticing either that this person is cut out to be the leader, or and you've done things to coach them up and trying to impact the things that they can impact, right? But you're constantly having to go in and do those things for them. Maybe they're not in the right position, right? And maybe they do need to step down. But make sure that you are definitely putting forth the effort so that you can show that, hey, look, this store can run right, and it does run right when I'm here. Like, are you sometimes just like we talked about before, showcase what needs to be done so that we are running, we're doing this the right way.
Yeah, hands down. And like, that location, I kid you not, once I made the right changes, once I was allowed to make the changes I needed to make, easy 100% year over year increase.
Yeah.
Consistently. Right. It actually averaged about 100 to 150% more every single month. Once I had everything taken care of. And the biggest thing, unfortunately, was having to put the right leader in place, meaning I had to replace a leader. Right. And it wasn't like I needed to change everybody at the location or things like that. I actually ended up adding more headcount to that location. I think when I left that market, that was in San Antonio. It went from, that location used to be a 1 in 6, so meaning a leader and 6 employees, one of them being an assistant manager, to I think it was 1 and 17 was the count. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it was tremendous. And it was really pushing on what they had, and then just making sure that the right leadership was there and having the right resources available for them. And also a lot of it too ended up being the training that I developed to help them get to that point. Right. Yeah. And it was funny because the the corporate entity that we were authorized for, they kept, after I took it over, they're like, oh, this should have been a corporate location. I don't know why you guys got it. I mean, they literally were telling me that they were talking to the organization about having it be taken over by corporate. And I was like, the hell you are.
Crazy.
Yeah. So it's all that fun relationship stuff you have on the back end. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it, mindset, mentality. You guys got to figure out where you're at on that scale. Are you really thinking long-term longevity about what you're doing, or are you putting the blame on everybody else? If you're putting the blame on everybody else, look in the mirror, because you got a mentality issue, and you got to cut that out. You got to throw that out, and you got to look in the mirror, and you got to ask yourself what you're actually trying to accomplish, and create a long-term goal to it. And that long-term goal could be 6 months, could be 12 months. I know you're going to say long-term goals are supposed to be years, are supposed to be this. A long-term goal is something that you want to get accomplished, and you're going to take the steps to get it accomplished, right? Short-term goals are typically goals you're going to do in a couple of months. Think of it as a quarter. A quarter is going to be more of a short-term goal. A long-term goal is something that's really going to help develop a habit. That's going to be the easiest way to really grasp that.
And that brings us to the end of today's Obvious Leadership episode. Remember, every great leader starts with one step, and you're already on your way. Small changes lead to significant impact. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember that leadership is the key to unlocking extraordinary results.